Hey friends, Caleb Townsend with Factur here. We are going to talk about selling up and down the org chart in a manufacturing plant or facility or company. We've all been in this situation, and what we want to avoid is to just get deep in the sales process, only find out that someone other than your relationship in the manufacturing company voted against your product or your service and you lost the deal. Today's conversation is really just to encourage discussion in the room today, that you all talk about things that you have done right and wrong facing this issue of not talking to the right people within an organization. Let's start by talking about the first contact that you make, because that's critical to get in the door within the right level. In common advanced sales training, practice is a call at the top. Start all the way at the top, and you can always work your way down, but it's a lot easier to work your way down than to work your way up. And I'm not disagreeing with that, but I've also made sales calls on companies. I called the CEO, and he says, "Why don't you call my engineering people? That's what I pay them to do." I just wasted my time forever trying to get to the CEO. I think there is an appropriate level to go into an organization at. Group conversation here. What criteria drives a level at which you want to get in the door at? So what things do you look at in a company that lead you to decide what level you want to go in at? Now's a good time to pause the video and discuss amongst your group. Let's talk about getting started on the right foot. And this is after you have gotten into an organization, you want to make sure the initial conversations that you're identifying who decision makers within an organization are. Here's some questions that I've used and had some success, and there's a lot that you can talk about internally in the room today. A great question to ask is, who else faces these types of problems? When you're meeting with the initiator, the first person that you're dealing with, ask them, who else has these problems that you're having and sharing with me today? Also, you want to inquire about what I'll call the opposing department. The classic example for this would be engineering versus purchasing. Sometimes engineering's wanting to have all the bells and whistles, and sometimes purchasing only cares about price. In reality, that's not always true. They typically look out for the best in their organizations, but they many times have different goals. If you are talking to engineering, you want to learn about what do they think that purchasing will say and vice versa. Next question that would be great to ask them about their past decision-making process. Who all was involved? What was the decision-making process look like? What was the time frame? You want to figure out how they've made other decisions. This is a better way to get truth than just saying, tell me how you're going to go about making this decision. Next and last question I have listed here is, what do you think that the individual up the ladder or the individuals down the ladder would say about the problem that they're facing? This will just give you kind of a testing as to what other people within the organization and how they would feel about this particular problem that you're coming in there trying to solve. Now would be a great time, again, to pause the video and talk internally about how you get off to the right foot by identifying the decision makers. Next, we're going to talk about DMUs, or decision-making units. The stats out there show that more and more individuals are involved in making a decision within organizations, and you simply can't get to all of them. You don't have access to all of them. Let's identify 5 different roles of decision makers within an organization. First one, we'll call them the initiator. And this is the person that will take meetings. They are reaching out to potential suppliers. They are open to conversations about people that'll help the business out. They're likely experiencing a pain or the looking for some sort of improvement, which we'll call a gain. Next, we're going to have influencers. These people may not be accessible, but they have influence over the decision. They may be an outside consultant that the business works with. Influencers also could be people in other plants or departments. The next person within the decision-making unit we're going to discuss is the naysayer. This is the contact that can't say yes, but they can sure say no with their actions. Sometimes these are the receptionists that will block calls or pass on faulty information. The naysayer is also the person that's real quiet in a meeting. Maybe they have a favorite person that you are trying to remove, or maybe there's even like a personal relationship that they may have with the other supplier that you're competing against. Next, we have the user. And these poor souls sometimes don't have a lot of input, but this is the person or the individuals who actually will be using the product or service that you're proposing. Lastly, we have the check writer. This is the C-level individual who typically gives the final yes or no. C-level people try to delegate. They try and trust their team as much as possible. They may really want to leave it in the hands of their team, but then ultimately will give the thumbs up or thumbs down. Some contacts may fill more than one of these roles. The initiator may also be the user. The influencer may also be the check writer. But these 5 areas cover a lot of the different roles within a decision-making unit. Now let's talk about when you need to go up. Here's the situation. Your contact that you've been working with, she's on board, she's giving you all the right buying signs, but either one of 2 things. She is honest about the fact that she is going to have to run the decision up the flagpole, or she says she makes a decision, but you get the impression it's just out of her jurisdiction. Again, this is all about asking the right questions to see if you can get to the DM or work with this person and equip them as they run it up the flagpole. A great question I like to ask is that if the decision was up to you, what would you say? And then ask them why. I've asked this question and they say, yeah, I probably wouldn't go with your product or service. At that point, you know they're not going to go to bat for you. Next question to say is, what has upper management said to you in the past when you brought opportunities like this to them? This will give you an idea if they do have influence within the organization. Now would be a great time to pause the video and talk about times that you need to go up the chain of command. Talk about a few examples that you've done right and that you have done wrong. Next, we're going to talk about going down the chain of command. On the surface, this seems easy. The people that are in power that you're working with, they just enforce new suppliers, equipment, process changes, ideas, software, or projects. They enforce the stuff that you sell, and the rest of people just have to deal with it. But what's the obvious risk? Users may gripe about your product or service. Users also may intentionally disrupt the implementation or disrupt the efficiency gains that your product or service gives that organization. And lastly, users may resist change. Not going down the chain of command or going down the chain of command improperly has some obvious risks. Now would be a great time to talk amongst the group about ways that you have worked to combat this threat of users down the chain of command disrupting the implementation of your product or service. Final thoughts. I've always found success going into companies at multiple levels within multiple departments. It's great to try and get multiple people on board, figure out individually what their problems are, and that may take separate meetings or phone calls. Then you can get a better idea of what is most important to each department and what their goals and objectives are. Never completely ignore purchasing when you're in tight with engineering or vice versa. This goes back to the opposing department's description that I shared earlier. Don't just ignore the other side because you're in tight with that other side. They may be critical, and there may be a time when you're not so in tight with purchasing or you're not so in tight with engineering. Lastly, don't be afraid to get out of deals when you quickly realize you can't get to the decision maker. And you may see a pattern in your sales process of where deals fall off, and when that is related to not talking to the right people, make adjustments in the way you prospect and make adjustments to the speed that you get out of deals when you're not talking to the right people. As a group here, to wrap up, share, do you prefer to do meetings with multiple departments in one room, or would you prefer to have those conversations separate? Hopefully you got a nugget or two regarding our conversation today about selling up and down the org chart.